Dwayne again for the second half of the lesson on doing your inventory. So here we go. Last week we went through 4 columns in your notebook, right? You know, to start doing your inventory. This week I saved the whole lesson for basically the 5th column or the 5th page, which is my part. Okay. And we're still on principle 4, we're still on step 4, and we're going to be on these two, this principle and the step 4 for at least another month now, throughout the whole inventory process. Because basically, this whole principle 4, which says openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust, it's basically talking about doing this inventory. Okay. And Matthew 5:8 says, "Happy are the pure in heart." So it's basically that we're talking about, we're going through a refining process with ourselves. We're going to get some of this stuff out of us that we buried so deep inside of us, and we're going to learn how to properly look at it, and we're going to learn how to properly, dispose of it so that it doesn't hurt us as bad or at all anymore. And so that's where we're at. And then step 4, okay, talks about doing that fearless moral inventory. And fearless because, basically, you don't want to look at the stuff. And you're afraid to look at it, okay, so to speak. You're afraid of what you might see. And that's why we get back to this balance, and then we get back to the scale, and that's why we need a sponsor or multiple sponsors. And that's why we need a relationship with God, and we need a prayer life. Because we're going to face the dragon, so to speak. I mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. We're going to go down in that deep, dark pit, and there's snakes, and there's a big dragon, and he's hoarding gold. Just like in the stories, you always hear, he's either got a beautiful woman down there that you have to save, or he's got a huge amount of gold down there. And basically all that's doing is symbolizing that if we get rid of the dragon and face him, or at least tame him, then we can do better in our lives. And that's where we're at, okay? And so we have already talked about 4 of those columns, or 4 of those sheets of paper. I can go back over those as a reminder. We had, first page was the person that we wrote down that harmed us, or the organization. The second one is the cause, okay? Remember that, the cause. The third thing was the effect, how it affected us then, how it's affecting us now, how it's going to affect us in the future if we don't change it, and the damage it's done to us, and the damage it's going to continue to do if we don't change it. But now we're on my part, and we're also going to talk about when it's not my part, okay? Because that's just as important in a few situations. And because I want to make sure you understand the difference, and we'll get into that. So basically, remember Lamentations 3:40 says, "Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord." So anyway, we talked about all 4 of those things, and we also mentioned that those things were basically talking about someone else or something else, and what that someone else or something else has done to us. Okay, but now we're going to talk about if we had any kind of influence over that whatsoever, or if we're doing things to hurt other people ourselves. They say hurting people hurt others, and God, that's so true. And the more they hurt, the harder they hurt other people so many times. Okay, and so ultimately, what we're doing with this moral inventory, or this inventory, honest inventory with ourselves, is we're trying to properly dispose of some of these hurts. We're trying to face the dragon that we don't want to face. It's the piece of paper at the bottom of the stack on your desk that's been there for 10 years, and you don't want to bring it back up. But we're going to yank that sheet off the bottom, throw it on top, and we're going to look at it, okay? So anyway, here's some examples. Did you play a part in a broken, damaged marriage or some other relationship? Okay? So, addressing these things could possibly lead to repairing that relationship or those relationships. Did you play a part in distancing yourself from a child or from a parent? In other words, did a relationship break down and you're just not talking to one of your children? They're not talking to you, or maybe a parent, you're not talking to them, they're not talking to you. Did you play a part in that? Someone's got to be the big person, okay? I'm just going to say that right now. Someone's got to be the bigger person, and, you know, why not make it you? Did you play a part in your job loss, okay? Or are you constantly in denial and blaming somebody else? Did you play a part? I mean, yeah, if you had a dumb supervisor or a dumb boss, you know, it's possible that you didn't play a part. But so many times bosses and supervisors are put in those positions because they are, you know, a little bit higher in the hierarchy and maybe smarter, or maybe they just have more experience. They may not be as smart, but maybe they have more experience. Maybe they've been with the company longer. So then if that's the situation, then you got to kind of look at yourself a little bit and ask yourself, well, maybe I played a part in that, and maybe next time I will kind of look at who the people I'm dealing with, and I'll kind of map it out a little bit better, and maybe I'll do a little bit better job and not get fired or whatever. So did you play a part in that? Okay. So here's another thing. Did you play a part in never having enough money to pay all your bills properly? That can go two ways. Either you're goofing off and are low ambition jobs, not living up to your potential, and the other thing is you're spending more than you make out of some kind of habit. And sometimes people's personalities cause them to do that, but you can get that under control, okay? So you need to write these things down, okay? And because nobody knows you more than you. You're just hiding from yourself and you're lying to yourself. But nobody knows you better than you. If you spend time with yourself and thinking about some things, you can fix this thing, but you've got to quit lying to yourself. Alright. Did you play any part in your addictions that you formed? In other words, did you go take that crack? Did you seek it out? Or did someone hold a gun to your head and force you to take it until you got addicted and then you got addicted? Same thing with alcohol, you know, do you drink a case every night because, you know, someone's forcing you to, or because you're addicted? Did you play a part in some of that? And sometimes people get into these addictive behaviors because they had some hurts in their life that they have to address and dispose of properly. So that's part of the inventory process. This isn't about judgment. This is about being honest with yourself, bringing up some of those hurts from the past, disposing of them properly, and then changing some of those neural pathways in your brain, some of the bad habits that you picked up along the way. And as I say so many times over the years, trade a bad habit for some good habits, okay? Because it's all about time and dopamine, okay? It's all about time and dopamine. Swap out those habits. Alright, so here's one. You know, all the stuff in the past, you've written down people or organizations that have hurt you. So now it's my part. In other words, it's your part, okay? So you sit down and you think about everybody that you have hurt, that you have used and overly used or abused or whatever. People that you've hurt. Write their names down one at a time. Write down what it is you did, you know, beside each one of them. And then have that on your list so that you can come back to it, and you may add some things or scribble out some things. And as you start to make this list, what you're going to do, you're going to find out that you know, everything may not come to you at one time, but once you get it written down in an organized fashion, there's going to be some more things that are going to come up that you can add to it, you know, later. And if you want to do it on a word processor, that's good too, but it's something that you need to be able to physically look at it. I would recommend, if you did it on a word processor, that you printed out your inventory and put it in a safe place, okay? You know, you may not want someone to find that if you're doing it, okay? So, you know, you don't want that thing to get away from you. So anyway, basically that list that you just wrote about people that you've hurt in the past, you know, later on through the program, we got a whole lesson that's going 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about making amends. And making amends brings all kinds of heat. I mean, not just to your life, but to other people's life, in your community, your family, and your network, so to speak, okay? So just keep in mind that the people you write down in this list, we're going to save all of it, obviously, but we're going to highlight those things, and we're going to come back to them later, and we're going to do a whole chapter, a whole section on dealing with making amends. And certainly there are some people, we're just going to talk about some people that you do not have to make amends with, okay? You just have to get peace in your heart. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about that right now, matter of fact. So, when is your part not your part? In other words, the sheet of paper you've got, and you've got your part you played in at the top, when is it not your part? Well, there is certain situations where instead of writing down something that was your part, where you played a part in it, you can write down in big bold letters with big black Sharpie, I had no part, I had no responsibility, I am not guilty, none, okay, no responsibility whatsoever, no responsibility whatsoever. Let me tell you, there's some sick people out there. Okay, we all know that. We see it in the news. We just don't see it in the news enough. It needs to be in the news more. But if you've been sexually molested when you were a kid, you didn't have any part in that. There's nothing anybody could say that would make anybody with any common sense whatsoever think that you had anything to do with that. But they will make you think you had something to do with it. Pedophiles are sick individuals. And, they'll make you think that you had something to do with it, and you didn't have anything to do with it. And you don't have to make amends with these people. Let me tell you, Jesus, peaceful Jesus, everybody talks about, love your neighbor, right? He said, someone slaps you, turn the other cheek. The woman at the well, as many things as she's done, he used her for something that was good, but he still told her to repent, And same thing with the guys who were stoning the adulterer. He wasn't just talking to the adulterous woman. A lot of people look at that, and they always look at the adulterous woman saying, oh, he was witnessing to her. And when he told her to repent, no, he told those guys, he was telling them they needed to repent too, Whoever of you, he convicted them of that, whoever of you, has a sin, cast the first stone. He was telling them, in so many words, read between the lines, to stop. And they stopped. You saw that, okay? But you know what he said about anyone, I'm going to read this verse. Matthew 18:6 says, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to sin, it is better for him or her, because women do this as well, that a heavy millstone be hung around his or her neck, and that he or she be drowned at the depths of the sea. Man, that sounds, and look, let's just say I'm not advertising, or I'm not advocating for someone to take a pedophile and tie a big heavy rock around him and throw him out, in the river and drown to death. I'm not doing that, and I'm not 100% sure that Jesus was saying that, because sometimes people speak in analogies. He may have, or he may have been saying something along the lines that, a pedophile does so much damage to a child that it's a whole lifetime of really a screwed up mess, a really bad mess. And that child may end up making a lot of bad mistakes, and may make some of the same mistakes. They may even turn into a pedophile themselves. So in a sense, he may have been just saying, because, I've always read and heard that pedophiles, once they do that they can't really stop it. They go to jail when they get out. That's the reason why they don't want them near schools or churches and things like that. because it's a repetitive thing and it's hard to rehab over. So maybe he was saying the damage was so good that they did so bad, that they did to children, and so terrible that it needed to be stopped now, and the only way you could stop it was, well, to basically put a millstone around their neck and throw them out in the water, okay, and drown them. There's other ways. They could put them in prison. I don't even know if, I guess they had prisons back then, but he's saying that they need to be stopped. And look, if you're a child and you had something happen to you like that, you're not responsible for it. You had no control over you being born. I had no control over me, being born. You had no control over what color your hair was when you were born. If you even had hair, you had no control over what color you were. If you were born white, black, brown, and whatever, you had no control over any of that. That's none of your choice. If you're a child and some older person molested you, that's not your fault. You had nothing to do with that. Even if you were friendly to them, children are friendly to everybody. They groomed. The fact is, they groomed you, and they did whatever they had to do, and then they abused you, and then they make you feel bad about it. And it's not your fault. Now, I will say this. So many times that person still has power over you, and maybe it was more than one person. But you have to forgive them. But forgiving them doesn't mean you have to hang around them. Forgiving them doesn't mean that you have to let them babysit your kids, because clearly that would be the dumbest thing you've ever done in your life, okay? That would be on your fault if you did that, okay? That would be something that you would put in that column, number 5, my part. If you were abused, and then you let the abuser babysit your kids, then yeah, that's bad, okay? But you're not going to do that in most cases. You're not going to do anything silly like that because you know better. So, anyway, that's the only time. Remember, he must not thought too much about pedophiles because Jesus, as far as that goes, he must have not thought a whole lot about him because, even the Roman soldier that was coming to put him on a cross when Peter cut his ear off, Jesus scolded Peter, and then he put the guy's ear back on and he healed it, right? But he's telling him anybody that hurts a small child, should have a big rock tied around their neck and tossed out into the sea. He didn't think a lot about pedophiles, okay? Or at least he didn't think a whole lot about the sins that they were capable of doing and the damage that they do to other people for a whole lifetime. That affects not only that person, but if they have children, it could affect them as well. I'm not trying to say that a pedophile cannot be saved. I'm just trying to say that because that's not up to anybody except for God. I believe anybody can be saved, and I honestly believe that. And I believe there's true repentance and there also can be true forgiveness as well. I believe that with my whole heart. There's nothing someone can do that'll keep them out of heaven if they have repented and truly loved God and have asked Him into their heart. But this is something that it takes tens of thousands of dollars of psychology and psychiatric bills over a woman's lifetime or a guy's lifetime, and not to mention, the damage to relationships it has done and so forth. So I'm not going to get too much more into that, but I just wanted you to know. That's why I want to do the whole section on this. The fifth column is your part in everything, except for that, okay? Because you absolutely, positively had no part in that. And this is not just about a child being molested. I'm also talking about a woman being raped. You played no part in that. You played no part in that. And, it's not your fault, okay? It's not your fault. and that's, you know, something that you just have to know. And you know, it wasn't some outfit you were wearing, because women get raped every day over in some of these countries where the women can't even show their ankles, so to speak, and they still get raped. So it has nothing to do with what you were wearing. Trust me on that. It has everything to do with some sin inside some violent rascal's heart, okay? And he's going to have to deal with that on his own. And you don't have to forgive him for it. I mean, you need to forgive him for it, but you don't have to go hang out with the guy. That's what I meant to say. And look, and in these situations, this is going to be the hardest thing that you're going to deal with, is something like that, okay? And that's the hardest thing. That's the thing definitely that's on the bottom of your stack on your desk that you don't want to pull out. This is not only a dragon, but it's 10 dragons to some people, you know, as far as some women and less number of men, but certainly some men. It's not just the equivalent of one dragon in a cavern. It is pretty much 10 ferocious, ugly, terrible fire-breathing dragons that they're going to have to come to terms with. You got to have a sponsor. You may need more than a sponsor in this situation. You may need professional help as well. So, but you definitely need some good sponsors. You need a good church home, and you need some loving type relationships in your life. People that actually care about you, and you know they care about you, and that they check on you, and you check on them, because this thing is not a one-sided thing. You hear about it all the time, you know. So and so don't care about me, they never call. When was the last time you called them? It's a two-way street. Well, look, this is how it works. The more one of you calls the other, the more that person calls you, and then you calling each other, and then you get worried about each other if someone don't hear about that from the other one in a few days, and then they call that person. And that's a good solid friendship right there. You have to kindle these friendships and relationships, okay? They don't just start naturally. And some people, you know, they don't even know what a friendship is, really. They've never had one. Just like some people don't even know what a family is. They've never had one. So sometimes they cut your throat, so to speak, because they don't know what it's like to have a family. And you may be one of those people. It's something to strive for. It's something to work towards. It's something that's wonderful, something that's great. And anyway, with that, I'm going to end this lesson, and then I'll see you next week, you know, and then we'll go on to the next. And you know, I'm praying for you, and I pray that you know, I pray that you strengthen your relationship with God, and that you kindle these relationships with your sponsors and your friends, and so forth. And then with that, I'm going to leave you, and God bless you, and you have a good night, and we'll catch you next time.